Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So, we are now into, we're coming up on, the middle of, like I said, this is the centerpiece of the Valdemar series, these 9 books. The Arrows trilogy, the Winds trilogy, which is the one we're about to start, and following it, the Mage Storms trilogy. So, the Winds trilogy is interesting in a couple of ways, the first of which is that this trilogy is very much one of those books that's really all one book. This trilogy it's not 3 separate stories that come together to form one larger story. This is, in fact, one story that's been split into 3 books. Now, it has good stopping points at the end of each of the first 2 books, but this is very much all of a piece, and nowhere is this more apparent in this very first book. In this first book, we meet various people. I believe this is Larry Dixon, Mercedes Lackey's husband, did all of these interior pictures. And if I recall correctly, we have Elspeth and her companion Gwen at the bottom. And on the left there we have, I don't remember which of the Tayledras it is because they all are kind of designed to look sort of the same. And also because I took all of these pictures very much out of the ebook version, and because I couldn't find my copy of this book. I know I own a copy of this, but I couldn't find it. And so I got too lazy to actually do scans. So these are all digital pictures, which means they aren't as good. But anyway, so Elspeth at the bottom, one of the Tayledras in the middle, which you may remember the Tayledras. They were the people who helped train Vanyel way back in the day. Remember Vanyel? From Magic's Pawn and Magic's Price, the last Herald Mage. And at the top there, the guy with all the hair, this is Falconsbane, and he's kind of the ultimate villain of the piece, of this particular trilogy anyways. And the thing about this first book is that the book follows 2 separate plot lines that eventually come together, but they come together really, really near the end of the book. They come together in a way that's almost an afterthought, unless you approach these 3 books as being all one book, in which case you have these 2 plots that have come together at slightly less than a third of the way through the whole plot line. See, we have Elspeth's plot, which is they have finally become aware that magic is a thing that exists in Valdemar, but they've been having trouble making people stick to remembering it. Because, you see, you may remember this has been an ongoing theme in the series, and this is the book, temporally speaking, that really, really explores what's going on here. That when Vanyel died, a spell got cast over all of Valdemar, a giant magical coercion spell that made people feel that magic was a thing that happened once a million years ago but couldn't happen today because it doesn't exist anymore. It made people dismiss the very idea of magic. When Elspeth manages to sort of force her, there is an incident that sort of smacks magic right back into everybody's face again, and Elspeth goes to do some research and finds, among other things, that Carowyn, the heroine of the book By the Sword, the protagonist of the book By the Sword, gets chosen at the end of By the Sword, which is the book that takes place in between Arrows and Winds, and Carowyn's grandmother was a sorceress. Carowyn had a magic sword. Carowyn used to have mages who worked with her and those mages couldn't follow her into Valdemar because of the thing in Valdemar that keeps mages from sticking it out because they go crazy. Which is how you would get if you thought people were watching you all the time in ever larger crowds. Anyways, Carowin's story is that her magical sorceress grandmother gave her a magic sword, and she did a bunch of heroic stuff with it when she was just a teenager. And the Ballad of Carowin's Ride made it to Valdemar, but everybody in Valdemar thinks it's a metaphor. They think it's a metaphor even after the Carowin of Carowin's Ride arrives and tells them, yes, I went riding with this sword. It's that pervasive. But they need to find a mage who can either come into Valdemar, who can either go through Valdemar, or who can in some way, it can in some way deal with this, because Ankar is a blood mage, a blood path mage, the kind of person who kills people because when somebody is killed, there is magical power released, or at least power that can be turned into magical power and used as a source of, battery power for mages if you're that kind of person. But he's a mage. His person, Hulda, who is kind of a sidekick and kind of the person who's pulling the strings behind the throne, who taught him magic but wants to keep control of him and so hasn't actually taught him all the things that he would theoretically need to know. They're both mages. They're collecting mages. They've started lobbing magical things across the border, and eventually Valdemar would wind up having to face mages, so Elspeth goes on a quest for this. The interesting thing, though, I believe this is a picture of Darkwind and some very melodramatic stuff. Yes, it is a picture of Darkwind. I didn't even pay attention to the fact that there are words. Anyways, the quest thing is actually a very big line in this book, because Gwenna, who is apparently, in fact, Grove-born, but who made everybody forget that she was Grove-born, has been busy arranging for a grand destiny for Elspeth. Here's where we will go, and here is what you must do, and this is our destiny. But she didn't tell Elspeth this. She's just been laying out a path and pushing Elspeth down it, and it makes Elspeth very, very tetchy. She spends a lot of time in these first two books tetchy, and a certain amount of time she spends tetchy because she is really, really sick of having somebody say, but we have a destiny for you. Like, literally she's saying that. This isn't sort of, something that's implied. This is very much Gwenna saying, but you didn't stick to the plan. And, they eventually wind up telling Gwenna, seriously, you expect her to stick to the plan when not only is this a ridiculous thing to have the plan, but also if you don't tell somebody that there is the plan, how can they possibly stick to it? So that's Elspeth. In the meantime, we have Darkwind, and the Tayledras are people who live out in the Pelargir forests, and the Pelargir forests have been horribly twisted by ancient magic, the magic of the Mage Wars. Remember the Mage Wars in Scandranan? Yeah, this is some of the remnants of those wars from about 4,000 years before, like literally millennia. And so you have Darkwind is one of the Tayledras, who are a cousin group to the Shinain, and they're busy trying to... They have been assigned the job by their goddess, the Star-Eyed Kalinel. They have been assigned to go and basically fix everything that's gone wrong up there and clean up all of the wild, problematic magic. Traven and Hydona are obviously griffins, and they're griffins who are very, very good friends of Darkwind's and who become important characters in this book. So what happened with Darkwind was there was a massive, massive tragedy several years ago, during which they were trying to build a gate, the magical doorway that allows you to instantaneously transit between two places, assuming, you know where you're going, because you can only send a gate to somewhere that you know where it is. And they were going to move their Hearthstone, which is sort of like a giant magical battery, to a new place because they were moving into a new area to clean up the magic, when the Hearthstone went kablooey, and everything has been a mess since, and a whole bunch of people died, and a great many of their people are stuck on the other end of the gate with no contact to all the mages. And we come across Darkwind, who is in this group of Tayledras who have been dealing with the aftermath of this tragedy for years now. And then we find out that this whole thing was actually due to a very specific person, Falconsbane. Falconsbane is very, very important to this series in a very intriguing way, not just in this trilogy, although obviously he is the main villain of this trilogy and the main villain of this book. He's a sadistic psychopath with magical superpowers who is an expert in sadomasochism and torture and sexual torture and a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's really kind of horrifying if you think about it. Anyways, you have Traven and Hydona, who are griffins, and they're just kind of emissaries, and well, I'll go into a little bit more when we get to that, because they're kind of just there in this book. They have a reason for being there, but their reason for being there isn't really explained until when you come up on the second book. Again, another example of how this series is all one big book in 3 parts, because they're just kind of there in this first book, and you don't know why, and you don't know what they're doing, and you don't know exactly what they want. You know they're probably nice people, but I mean, that's a picture of Darkwind's father, Starblade, who got captured by Falconsbane and basically broken. Anyways, so by the end of this book, Starblade gets freed from Falconsbane's grasp, because he had, like I said, broken him and cast a bunch of magical compulsions on him and a whole bunch of other stuff. This book is the establishing first third. This is a book that gets all of the players in this trilogy into place. It's a book that establishes who Elspeth is now that we're going to be dealing with things from her perspective. It gets us introduced to Darkwind, who does wind up being Elspeth's romantic partner, although that's a thing that doesn't kick in until the second book. It introduces the Griffins, and in a lot of ways, in terms of this series, this is the first time that we hear from Griffins, because the Mage Wars trilogy, which, if you've been reading these in chronological order as I have been, you've read them umpty-squillion weeks ago. But if you were reading these in order of publication, the Mage Wars trilogy didn't come out until after this. The Mage Wars trilogy came out at the same time as the Mage Storms trilogy, and so these are the first Griffins you meet. If you're reading this the way I would recommend it, which is in order of publication. In any event, they eventually manage to beat Falconsbane off, and they think they may have defeated him, and it's all very dramatic and wonderful, and Elspeth is going to get her training, And Darkwind more or less has his father back, and there's a side issue involving Nyara the cat girl, but we'll talk about that some other time, such as when I see you all next week.